Greetings, viewers. Welcome back to Hansraj e-Samvaad Center, a center for digital learning and knowledge creation. In the series of the lectures that I have been taking up for VAC Culture and Communication, today I'm going to go on to the next part, to the next reading of the VAC Culture and Communication. Today we are going to study Bhagavad Gita and the introduction to Bhagavad Gita by Sri Aurobindo, which is a part of our syllabus at the VAC Culture and Communication at University of Delhi. Let's begin with the introduction to the Gita which Sri Aurobindo has written. Right? So if just a brief recap of the previous lectures. So we have done several lectures, we have done several topics wherein we have tried to read several parts of our syllabus to understand the ancient Bharatiya culture and the ancient Bharatiya thought through those readings which form a part of our syllabus. So in the last lecture, we understood the gender culture, Sudha Murthy's story, right? We read Sudha Murthy's story, and Sudha Murthy's story was to understand the culture of gender as it existed in the 1960s, 1970s, 1980s India, when the idea of a woman was still something which was circumscribed within the four walls, and it was not so prominent back then. Sudha Murthy broke the silos, she came forward and she became a woman, a leading woman who became experimental and who played a vital role in allowing women to get outside the circumscribed households into the larger world. So the previous story was to understand the gender culture of India. Now this part, this topic, this new part of our syllabus is to understand the religious culture of India and its universal appeal. So when we talk about Bhagavad Gita is a Hindu text firmly established within the Hindu political, the Hindu social, the Hindu cultural and the Hindu religious thought. But what I propound is that Bhagavad Gita is a universal text. It's a text which spans humanity. It's a text which spans all religions. It's a text which spans all cultures together. Right? So even though Bhagavad Gita might be strongly associated with the Hindu cultural thought, it is still and will always remain a universal text. Right? So Gita is not just a religious book. In this part of the lecture, I'll be talking a bit about Bhagavad Gita. I'll be just giving an introduction about Bhagavad Gita and my views on the ancient book Bhagavad Gita. Then we'll go on to the next part, and that is we'll be reading, as has been my pattern in the previous lectures, as has been my practice in the previous lectures. I'll be reading the entire text line by line, focusing on the important parts of the lecture and the important parts of the text. So Gita is not just a religious book, I would say, but it is something which is much more than that. It's a part of the Bharatiya Jnana Parampara, or the Indian knowledge systems, the IKS. And as we know, this VAC Culture and Communication is a lot about the ancient Indian knowledge systems as it existed thousands and thousands of years ago. And our attempt at the University of Delhi is to ensure that these aspects of the Bharatiya cultural thought, these aspects of the Bharatiya Gyan Parampara are propounded, are distributed amongst the students through these VACs, that is the value addition courses, and thereby bring in a certain value, add a certain value to our idea of the Bharatiya cultural and philosophical thought. Right? So there is, I say that there is a need to shift the narrative now. Sitting in 2024 right now, as I am recording this lecture, we can notice that there is a very different way in which, the entire narrative, the global narrative is being shifted. And all of us should be very fortunate, should consider ourselves fortunate enough to be living, to be thriving at such a momentous occasion. Right? So there is a need to shift the perspective of the global culture from the West to the East now. So this VAC, Culture and Communication, attempts to do exactly that. That is why I consider this particular VAC as one of the most important VACs amongst the pool of VACs that are being offered in Delhi University. Right? So particularly Gita, when we talk about Gita, so there is this need to shift the cusp of global culture towards the East, and the best way in which it can be done is through understanding the ancient esoteric knowledge that is inscribed within Bhagavad Gita, right? So therefore Gita and the knowledge which is there in Bhagavad Gita is extremely essential to understand, to bring about a change in this perspective, to bring about a decolonizing, I would say, right? So as I mentioned, sitting in 2024, we are now witnessing the shift of the world towards the east, right? So we are on this cusp, we are on this cusp of this global change of narrative, right? So this introduction by Sri Aurobindo gives us a perspective on what Gita is. Basically, this entire essay has 3 or 4 major parts. The first part is the speaker, then it is the listener, and then it is the circumstance of the Kurukshetra war, the Mahabharat war. So as we know, in the Bhagavad Gita, it's a big dialogue between two men. The speaker is definitely Lord Shri Krishna. Then we have the listener, who is the Gandhivdhari Arjun, and then the circumstance, that is the war, the Mahabharat war, the circumstance of the Bhagavad Gita and the condition, the situation of Bhagavad Gita as a religious text, and that was placed within the larger war framework, right? So there was a war going on, and within that circumstance, within the circumstances of war, this ancient cultural, this ancient philosophical, this gem of knowledge and of wisdom was propagated to us by none other than the speaker, Sri Krishna. So just a few lines about the importance of Bhagavad Gita. Why have we not, why not Upanishads? Why only Gita? Why not Veds? Why not Purans? Have you ever thought about it? The reason is that, even during the political struggle for independence, during the 18th century, 19th century, why did only the Bhagavad Gita inspire people like Mahatma Gandhi, people like Bal Gangadhar Tilak, several other people, several other freedom fighters, several other philosophers like Sri Aurobindo, like Swami Dayanand Saraswati? They were all inspired by the Vedas, of course. I'm not saying that they were not inspired by the Vedas. Why did Bhagavad Gita become the center of the political struggle during the independence? The reason is that the Purans, the Upanishads, the Veds did not appeal much. They did not appeal a lot to the freedom fighters, right? The reason is that they were too distant. The Vedas, the Purans, the Upanishads, they did not focus on action, right? But it is Bhagavad Gita which focuses on action. Gita focuses on Karma Yoga, on duty, on action. And this is exactly what the 19th century, what the 20th century freedom fighters were looking for, and that is action. It was their karma. So this is the idea of the Karma Yoga as propounded in Bhagavad Gita, and Sri Aurobindo in this introduction focuses and forces upon that. For example, Upanishads. The Upanishads also believe that renunciation is the best way of attaining God. But as we know, in this material world, in this Kali Yuga, renunciation might not be so easy to get, right? But Gita does not say that. Gita says that you can attain the Lord, you can attain God even without renunciation of all your worldly desires. You can still do that. So Gita does not say that you have to live like a hermit, you'll have to live like a rishi, you have to live like a saint. So Gita does not say that. So therefore, the Gita appeals more to us as human civilization, as modern civilization, I would say. The Gita appeals more to us as a modern civilization because it is not as distant as the Upanishads or the Veds or the Purans. This is the reason. So therefore, Bhagavad Gita appeals to the nationalist as well. And therefore, Bhagavad Gita is much more closely associated with Kali Yuga. Bhagavad Gita is much more beneficial for all of us to read so that we can attain the true understanding of the ancient wisdom and the ancient political and cultural thought. So when we talk about Sri Aurobindo, when we talk about Bal Gangadhar Tilak, when we talk about Mahatma Gandhi, and not just these people, there were several other people, both extremists as well as moderates, and both of them were inspired by Bhagavad Gita. Now, a brief idea about this part of our syllabus. So Sri Aurobindo, while he was in jail in 1909, From that point onwards, Sri Aurobindo tried to learn, tried to read about Bhagavad Gita, and this introduction is a product of those times. Let us go forward now and let us start reading the essay, which is a part of our syllabus. So I've given a brief intro about Sri Aurobindo. I've also informed you about the various points. I've also given you a brief intro about Bhagavad Gita, right? So let us now start the point. I'll be reading the introduction, so we'll start from our syllabus from here onwards. Now, look at the first two paragraphs as you can see on the screen now. The Gita ranks first among the world's scriptures. The knowledge that has been briefly explained in the Gita is the highest and most secret knowledge. The law of right living, dharma, propounded in the Gita includes in its scope and is the basis of all other law of right living. The way of work shown in the Gita is the eternal path for the world's march to the heights. The Gita is like a bottomless sea, the source of a myriad gems. One may spend a whole lifetime fathoming its depths and still not touch its bottom or gauge how deep it is. One may search for 100 years and still find it difficult to gather even 100th part of the riches contained in this endless storehouse of gems. And yet, if one can recover even one or two of these gems, the poor man may become rich, the deep thinker acquire wisdom, the hater of God become a devotee, the mighty and the powerful hero of action come back to his field of work fully equipped and ready to achieve his life's purpose. So you see, when Sri Aurobindo is writing about Bhagavad Gita, so as the readers know, these lines that we read, Sri Aurobindo is commenting on the idea of Bhagavad Gita. And when Sri Aurobindo is doing that, he's not at all, not even at one place has he talked about the Bhagavad Gita as being an ancient Hindu text, as being only and only a Hindu text. He's talking in very general terms. If you read these two paragraphs again, the one which I just read now, you would realize that these are very general terms in which Sri Aurobindo is talking about. So the first two paragraphs do not talk about Bhagavad Gita as a Hindu religious text. No, they don't. It is a religious text associated with Hinduism. It is a religious text associated with Hindus, but it is not a Hindu text. It would be incorrect to say that Bhagavad Gita is a universal text. It's a text for humanity at large, right? It goes beyond religion. Bhagavad Gita goes much beyond religion. That is the strength of Bhagavad Gita, right? So Aurobindo talks about Gita as a document of life, Gita as a moral document, Gita as a conduct of life, of how to conduct one's life, of how to conduct the day-to-day activities in one's life. It would be better to call Gita as a book of conduct, right? And that is why, several people, all across the world, even the Western people, when you talk about the Eastern thought, when you talk about the Western thought, people like T.S. Eliot, Thomas Stearns Eliot, people like T.S. Eliot, Emerson, Mark Twain. Then, if you talk about the recent times, Hollywood actors like Cillian Murphy for sure, and very recently he came up with his movie Oppenheimer, and we know the ideas that Robert J. Oppenheimer himself took from the Bhagavad Gita. You talk about Carl Sagan. You talk about William Dalrymple. You talk about Will Smith, the actor. So we see how the entire Western world is also mesmerized by the wisdom that Bhagavad Gita actually gives us, right? So, and I'll be reading this quote by Henry David Thoreau. And he says, the reader is nowhere raised into and sustained in a bigger, purer or rarer region of thought than in the Bhagavad Gita. One more quote by Ralph Waldo Emerson. I owed a magnificent day to the Bhagavad Gita. It was the first of books. So he calls it as the first of books. It was as if an empire spoke to us, nothing small and unworthy, but large, serene, consistent, the voice of an old intelligence which in another age and climate had pondered, and thus disposed of the same questions which exercise us. Right? So you see how the West also praises, the West also praises Bhagavad Gita, and not just these people. If you do a simple Google search, you will find hundreds and hundreds of people, hundreds of thinkers, hundreds of philosophers, hundreds of men of influence, hundreds of women of influence who have taken deep inspiration from the Bhagavad Gita. So let us go forward now. So we read the first two paragraphs. And understood that, Aurobindo talks about Gita as a universal book, as a document of life, as a document of moral thinking, right? Let's go forward now. As you can now see on the screen, the Gita may well have 1,000 commentaries, but a time will never come when a new one will not be needed. There is no world-renowned scholar of man of deep knowledge can write a commentary on the Gita upon reading, which we can say, this is enough, it will no longer be necessary to add another commentary, everything has been grasped. After expanding all our intellectual powers, we can hope to understand and explain only a few facets of this knowledge that Gita gives. After being engrossed in yoga or rising from height to greater height on the way of desireless works, all we shall be able to say is that we have experienced some of its truths or have applied in the course of this life one or two of its teaching in actual practice. So Sri Aurobindo says that Gita is an endless source of commentaries, and anyone reading Gita will find a place to comment on it. He says to elucidate as an aid to others whatever little the present writer has realized in experience, whatever little he has practiced in the way of works, whatever meaning he has found by reasoning and thought based on that experience and practice, this will be the aim of these essays. So basically, Sri Aurobindo will tell how he learned from Bhagavad Gita, right? And how he has applied in his own life. So he's just trying to say that. Now, the first major subtopic, and that is the speaker. As we know, the speaker in this case is Shri Krishna. So if you can just simply scroll down the first few paragraphs of this subsection. So the first 4 paragraphs is about the place and the role of Krishna in Mahabharata, the importance of Krishna, as perhaps it might not be wrong to say that Krishna was the real protagonist of Mahabharata. I believe that it might not be wrong to say on my part that Krishna was the real protagonist of Mahabharata. Some people consider, the various other characters like maybe Shakuni or maybe Bhishma or maybe the Pandavas or one of those Pandavas to be the protagonist of Mahabharata. But I strongly believe that it was Lord Sri Krishna who was the protagonist. And we know the protagonist, the main character around which everything revolves. And perhaps it was only around Sri Krishna that everything revolved in the Mahabharata. So it will not be wrong to say that Sri Krishna should be the rightful protagonist of Mahabharata, the epic. Okay, a few pages down, you can see page number 27 right now, as you can see on the screen. So on page number 27, the first paragraph, it talks about what Kali Yuga means. So the first paragraph that you can see, it talks about what Kali Yuga means, the features of Kali Yuga, right? Then come to the second para, where Sri Aurobindo goes on to describe the cyclic nature. He goes on to describe the cyclic nature of the 4 yugas, okay? That is the Satyug, Treta Yuga, Dwapar Yuga, and the current one in which we are all living, the Kali Yuga. Right? So here Sri Aurobindo goes on to describe the cyclic nature of these 4 yugas and how at the end of Kali Yuga, once again, the cycle, the pattern will begin of Satyug. So these yugs, the first mention is not in Mahabharata, but in various Purans, in various Veds, in Vishnu Puran, in Vishnu Smriti, in Manu Smriti, in Mahabharata, in Gita. There is a mention of these 4 yugas. So as you can see on the screen, he says, moreover, just as in astrology, all the planets enjoy their sub-periods in the period of a particular planet, so in the period of Kali, each of the 4 ages, Sat, Treta, Dwapar and Kali, repeatedly enjoys its sub-period. Through this cyclic moment, there is this Kali age, a great downfall followed by an upward trend, and another great downfall, again an upward surge. These falls and rises serve the purposes of gods. And then few lines below, he says, Shri Krishna has left in the Gita the secret knowledge and the method of work that will be useful for bringing in the age of truth, the Satyug. So when the time comes for the sub-period of Kali, the worldwide propagation of the law of Gita is inevitable. The time has now come, And that is why the recognition of the Gita, instead of being confined to a few men of wisdom and learning, is spreading among the generality of men and in foreign land. So when I say that, in 2024, we are at a very critical juncture, because at this point of time, there is this shift which is occurring. So the Western centric worldview, the Western centric viewpoint, the Western centric hegemony is now shifting towards an Eastern centric assimilation. Because the West hegemonizes, the East assimilates. This is our culture. This is the ancient Bharatiya culture. This is the Bharatiya Gyan Parampara. So we are here not to hegemonize, but rather to assimilate, to bring space, to bring openness to all cultures, to all myriad cultures and thoughts and philosophies and practices. That is what India is. That is what Bharat has always been. Right? So that is why Sri Aurobindo says that now is the time to make sure that Bhagavad Gita does not remain only and only with the select few learned men. Rather, it should be propagated to the world at large. That is the importance of Gita. Therefore, it is not possible to distinguish Sri Krishna, the speaker, from his word, the Gita. Sri Krishna is implied in the Gita. The Gita is Sri Krishna in his form of the word. If you see, essentially, what Sri Aurobindo is suggesting is that if you wish to go from Kali Yuga to Satyug, it is only Bhagavad Gita that can ensure and help you achieve that. That is the larger purpose of the Bhagavad Gita. So that is the first part of this long essay. I'll stop here as of now. I'll be uploading another video, a second video on the various other sections. So that is the end of part 1 of Sri Aurobindo's introduction to Bhagavad Gita. I hope these ideas by Sri Aurobindo, these ideas of the ancient esoteric philosophical thought, these ideas inscribed in the pages of Bhagavad Gita gave a food for thought for all our viewers. And since this is a part of our syllabus, VAC Culture and Communication, I believe the readers, the viewers, the students of Delhi University will benefit a lot from these ancient knowledge systems. I'll see you very soon in the next part of the lecture. Till then, keep reading Bhagavad Gita, keep watching Hansraj e-Samvaad, keep sharing this video, keep commenting. I'll see you very soon in the next part of the lecture. Thank you for now. Have a good day.